Good evening and welcome to In Focus. I'm Ram Bursi. Israel once again kills dozens and injures many more by bombing Dar al-Aqam school, which shelters displaced people in a neighborhood northeast of Gaza City, which is the second shelter to be targeted by the occupation within 24 hours. At the same time, the World Food Programme has announced its 19 remaining bakeries in Gaza are closing in the face of a severe shortage of supplies following Israel's month-long blockade of the territory. With the closure of the bakeries due to shortages of fuel and essential supplies, the people of Gaza face an unprecedented catastrophe. Meanwhile, the international community takes action, with the UN passing a resolution to impose an arms embargo on Israel, condemning its violations of international law. As Israel's military intensifies its siege, the pressure mounts on the global stage. How can the international community respond effectively to protect the rights of the Palestinian people? This question and many more will be asked here on this episode. Let's start off by taking a look at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, so stay with us. Continuing its pattern of crimes against humanity, Israeli airstrikes have targeted Dar al-Aqam school in the Tufah neighborhood, east of Gaza City. Initial reports suggest a massacre, with the Israelis responsible for the killing and injuring of displaced Palestinians who had sought refuge at the school. Dozens of Palestinians, including women and children, were killed and wounded at Dar al-Aqam school, which shelters over 1,000 displaced individuals. This marks the second such shelter attacked by Israeli forces within 24 hours. Meanwhile, Gaza's civil defense has reported that it has no resources left to respond to the ongoing Israeli bombardment, and medical teams are unable to retrieve victims due to the intensity of the strikes. To analyze the current situation, we're joined from the occupied Jerusalem by Ratiba Ndacha, a member of the Palestinian National Committee, Action Committee. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Ratiba. Firstly, let's start off by asking the obvious question. Dozens were killed and injured by the Israeli airstrikes in a bombing of a school that shelters displaced people in the neighborhood in northeast Gaza. How do you view this recent escalation by the occupying forces, especially that this also happened at UNRWA facilities yesterday?
Yes, it seems that there's unlimited for these Israeli attacks and escalation on Gaza Strip. It seems that they will aim to kill as much as possible of the Palestinian and to transfer the rest of the Palestinian. This is what it seems these escalations goals on Gaza Strip, targeting more than 229 shelters till now, including Al Arqam School today and Al Fahd School as well today, and announcing that they will target Al Arqam School again today. And as you know, there's nowhere to go for the people who are sheltering in these schools because there's no safe spaces in Gaza at all. The huge collapse in services, medical services, and the lack of tracks or anything that can get people from these buildings under these buildings, and all of these things gives no chances for the people to live. The injured people, they have no chances to be cured in this collapse and this situation. It seems that the Israeli
The situation is
escalation.
basically dire. So basically, let me ask you this: since you talked about the civil defenses and the efforts exerted to try to save people's lives there, again we talked about this being the second shelter for displaced people to be targeted within 24 hours, and now the Gaza Civil Defense says they are no longer able or capable of confronting the Israeli bombings or even attempting to save the lives of people and victims within the shelter itself. How do you read the situation now in Gaza, and what does this mean for those who are injured in these shelters?
As I told you, there's no chance for them to be cured. There's a huge collapse in the medical sector completely in Gaza. There's no ambulances. They targeted the workers in the
Yes.
humanitarian aids as a special. So we are talking about no chance for those people to be saved or secured or cured there's no possibility for them. I think there's no ways of facing the escalation of the Israeli attacks now in Gaza. We lose everything. There's no stocks, medical stocks at all in Gaza. They are targeting the doctors, the hospitals, the clinics. Everything is target as if they mean to end the life of the people, if not by killing them directly in the attacks, by killing them by this lack of services in Gaza.
Well, as you said, that this is intentional, and a lot of international bodies have voiced concern, and even the UN itself, the UN Human Rights Council resolution, condemned Israel's action and called for a total arms embargo rather, for the 58th session. How significant is this step, and do you think it will lead to any sort of tangible pressure on Israel, or is Israel completely dependent on the Americans for military and weaponry supplies?
Actually, when you are talking about the Human Council, it's like talking about something that it's really has suspicious if what is happening in Gaza is still accountable or not accountable in their mean measurements. Still, there's a lot of countries didn't vote in a punishment on Israel or in stopping these escalation on Gaza Strip. When we are talking about the UN resolution, it means nothing without having any tools to be implemented in reality. They didn't have any tools to punish or to stop them or to force them to enter humanitarian aid or to put Israel under the international law at all. They have no ways of implementing these results. It seems that it's useless. And now what we saw that Netanyahu is challenging the world and the ICC by traveling to Hungary today,
Yes.
to Budapest, and no one can arrest him. And even though one country like Hungary is getting out of the ICC because they don't want and they didn't have the will to arrest Netanyahu, and no one stopped him at all. That means one thing, that the international community is not really have a real will to
Yes.
stop what is happening in Gaza, and they didn't account the souls of the Palestinians, and they don't want to make what is happening accountable for Israel or punish Israel about what is happening. So everyone is letting this happen in the view of every on everyone scenes, and no one is taking any action in this international committee. Even when any country like Egypt or other Arab countries try to put a plan for the next day of this war, Israel worked very hardly to fall in this plan and to escalate in attacking Gaza. So these plans will not see the sun and have no chance to be implemented anymore, or any agreement can be reached for ceasefire very soon by this escalation. So talking about the international community is like a nonsense now for any
Yes.
Palestinian. We are not looking from them to do anything after 17 months
So,
of these mascara
yes.
without any action.
Well, I mean, this sort of brings up the next question here. As a Palestinian yourself, how are you feeling when it comes to what's happening? Like you said, international law is not being applied, and it seems that the aggression continues on for the next, for the last 17 months it's been going on. How do you feel as a Palestinian, or in general, how do Palestinians feel?
Actually, we feel that we are left alone in this world, that we are not accountable as a human being in this planet, that we didn't deserve to be a part of this human humanity on this planet anymore. Yes, we are feeling down, and everyone is really feel insecure, not just in Gaza Strip, but escalation is in the West Bank, in
Yes.
Jerusalem, everywhere. The Palestinians feel insecure anymore, and they feel that they are left, and they are in a very difficult situation now, and maybe it's the most difficult situation we faced since 8 decades till now, with this silence all around the world. Maybe we have some people raising up here or there, but for the governments it means nothing. They didn't take any action. They still have statements saying that they feel disappointed or whatever. I think that they feel the warrior of the UN is now escalating more than any action that they can take, and I think that this is the beginning of the collapse of this international legitimacy at all. And maybe the only chance for the Palestinian and hope, if there's a new international world will and the committee will raise up with a new forces and the new laws, can put Israel accountable and under these laws, and uh, find a solution for this Palestinian case and give us an independent state. Without that, we will feel more and more left out, and more threatened and afraid as Palestinian.
Okay, so now Israel has expressed intentions to continue its military operations in Gaza, as well as expanding the control over strategic areas. What does this signal for the future of Gaza? And are the people in Gaza fearful of possible displacement or forcible displacement into other countries?
Actually, there's no chance for any Palestinian to think about living in another country neither than Palestine. We prefer to die on this earth than to be transferred to another countries. So if they give us three chances, the Israelis give us three choices, sorry, to be killed or to be transferred or to live under the occupation, we will choose to live, to be killed, or to live and resist till the last breath that we have to get our independence, and we will not choose to be transferred to any countries, not third countries or fourth countries. We prefer to be in heaven or to be on earth on the Palestinian land, not any other choices as Palestinian. So I think that this is what pushed Israel to escalate their attacks and kill more and more Palestinians, because they know that the Palestinian will not choose to be transferred or travel to any other countries.
Okay, Mr. Tiba, if you could stay with us as we continue to delve more into the latest developments in Gaza in our second segment. Thank you for just staying with us. As the humanitarian crisis deepens, the World Food Programme has announced that the remaining bakeries in Gaza will close due to a severe shortage of supplies. while Israel argues that the supplies entering Gaza during the recent ceasefire are sufficient to sustain the population for an extended period. UN officials report that stocks of flour and cooking oil have already run out. According to the New York Times, the UN agency stated that it would distribute its final food parcels by today, and its remaining supplies are expected to run out within 2 weeks. The decision to close the bakeries comes nearly a month after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered a complete halt to all humanitarian aid into Gaza in an effort to pressure Hamas into agreeing to a new detainee exchange deal. The lack of humanitarian aid over the past month has sparked violent competition for food and caused prices to soar. In response to the announcement, desperate Gazans have rushed to UN warehouses, scrambling to collect bags of flour following distribution. In addition to the World Food Programme's announcements of a closure of all bakeries in Gaza, Israel's plans seize large areas of the Strip in a major expansion of military operations, according to the Israeli Defense Minister on Wednesday. This comes as airstrikes continue to target the territory where supplies are rapidly depleting. The Washington Post reported that Israeli leaders believe increased military pressure on Hamas is the best way to secure the release of the remaining detainees in Gaza. However, Hamas has stated that detainees will only be released through negotiations. In response, the families of Israeli detainees expressed alarm, saying they were horrified by the CAT statement, but expanding the buffer zone in Gaza inside war-torn Gaza. The resumption of fighting, coupled with the ongoing blockade on aid imposed by Israel a month ago, is further worsening the suffering of a population already exhausted after more than 17 months of war. We continue on with our guest, Ratiba Anacha, a member of the Palestinian National Action Committee. Thank you again for staying on with us. Let me ask you, the World Food Programme announced its 19 remaining bakeries in Gaza are closing in the face of severe shortages of supplies following the Israeli blockade. Could you explain the broader implications of this action on the population, especially in terms of food security, and also given that most of the population are very young and children mainly?
Yes. I think most of the people now in Gaza is depending 100% offering their food supplies from kitchens, aids, and the bread that the World Food Program implement in Gaza. So stopping these services means that those people will die on hunger. In the previously we talked about achieving like the fourth level of hunger in Gaza Strip. Now we are talking about more than million people, most of them from children and elder people, are threatened by being died in hunger because of hunger in Gaza Strip. I think that the people will lose completely the food secure in Gaza by stopping these services and stopping these organizations from supplying them with the food and the bread as a minimum supply of and protect anymore. And they didn't cooperate with any international organization, and they didn't give any protection for the worker in the humanitarian aid anymore. That means that this complicated the work of these organizations and put their teams on the threat of be targeted. And we witness
The
a lot
Israelis
of
have attacked any international body that has said anything about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. In fact, they called anyone who targeted Israel, or not targeted, rather condemned Israeli actions by calling them anti-Semitic. Why isn't anyone sort of pushing back towards the Israelis?
actually the international community and the international organization um, talk very shamefully about these Israeli
The Israeli statements?
Actually, what?
You mean Israeli statements?
The Israeli statements, it doesn't make any sense. They have like statements that it's not like considered in any category that we know in the international law. They are above the international law. They have like their special criteria that no one can understand these criteria of a humanitarian issue, and allowing themselves to do whatever they want. We have statements and very weak statements from these international organizations, and they didn't means that they have a real will to take any action against what is happening or these Israeli statements anymore. Everyone is afraid from being accused to be anti-Semitic, and this guilty feeling of anti-Semitic and the Nazis' actions that happens to the Jewish 8 decades before the 8 decades is still yani eliminating the act of these international organizations, especially the European organization in particular. So they didn't get really any statements that can attack Israel or be against the Israeli statements anymore. They try to be polite and put a word that didn't considered as anti-Semitic anymore. And way of behavior give Israel a green line to escalate their attacks on the Palestinian, and they know that they are uncountable, so they can do whatever they want. And this international organization will just write a report that says that the Israel is now doing this and that, but no action will be taken. Since 17 months till now, they didn't take any action to enforce Israel to over 6 points to enter humanitarian aids to Gaza, and they didn't. They just accept have like two entry points from Rafah and Karm Abu Salem
Yes.
as an entering points for these humanitarian aids,
Yes.
and this is make the flow of these aids very slow, and no one take action against that. So what will happen now, that they will still write reports about these slowing of entering aids or stopping of entering aids, but no one will take any action against that.
Well, I mean, again, you said like there is a blockade towards the Gaza Strip, and this isn't the first time that the Israelis have imposed a blockade on the Gaza Strip. How can the international community, the UN, stop the impending humanitarian disaster from happening? What immediate steps can they take to alleviate the suffering of Palestinians? For instance, we've seen in the past airdrops of supplies. Has this worked for the Palestinians, or are there other means to do this?
Actions to be taken. You mean when they dropped the aids on the Palestinian, it was with the agreement of Israel. Israel agreed to have these drops of aids, and everything can be done with the agrees of Israel and allowance of Israel to be done. I think that the international law, the international community, and the UN agencies is weaker than taking any action against the Israeli well. So I don't think that they can have any action to enforce Israel to enter these aids anymore. And we witness this weakness day by day. We are talking now about one month of stopping all kinds of supplements and aid to Gaza, and no one take any action. We are talking about a very disaster level of a humanitarian situation in Gaza Strip, and no one is taking an action. So we are not waiting from them to take any action, because we know that they didn't have any will. They are very weak. They didn't have any ways of forcing Israel to take any action. I think that Israel just understand the language of forcing it and using this empowerment of these organizations, and this organization didn't have a real will to enforce Israel or to use any kind of this power to implement these suggestions or to enter any aids
Yes.
to Gaza Strip. Till now, they
Yes.
use the peaceful ways and negotiation with
Okay.
Israel, and Israel is following any kind of negotiation till now.
Yes, okay, thank you so much, but unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you for joining us. That was Ratiba Nacha, a member of the Palestinian National Committee. Thank you for joining us here on In Focus. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Focus. Thank you for joining us here on Q News. I'm Raham Orsi. Thank you for joining.